Colleagues, good morning. We have a very short period of time today because we have votes in an hour, and I have three live bodies in the room as well as lots of live bodies outside of the room. And so Madame Gaudreau, Mr. Angus and Mr. Barrett have already made their intentions known by their hands. So Madame Gaudreau.
Bonjour.
Good morning. I hope that you can hear me. It's quite cold outside today. First of all, Mr. Chair, I would like to revoke the vote that took place on the last meeting. Is it possible to revoke the vote, and how can we proceed to do so?
Consulted with the clerk extensively on this. This is not the first time that I've heard of this, and there would be a process, but it's quite sophisticated. There'd have to be a motion that would have to be voted on in regards to negativizing the previous vote, and it would be possible, but it is not something that is. Put it this way, we'd prefer not to set a precedent in that regard. It's a slippery slope. Once you negativize one vote, then it calls into question the consistency of our voting regimen. So, yeah, that's where I would rule, Madame Gaudreau.
Alors, j'imagine que je peux, comme j'ai la parole.
So I imagine, as I have the floor, I can table a motion, Mr. Chair? Yes, certainly. This is a motion that you received in the digital folder. I will be reading it in French as slowly as possible. That pursuant to Standing Order 1083H, the committee examine the measures in place to avoid and prevent conflicts of interest in the federal government policies with regard to contracts and grants or contributions and other expenses. B, that in carrying out this study, the committee study mainly, but not limited to, contracts with regards to speeches of Justin Trudeau and Sophie Grégoire Trudeau within the framework of activities organized by Speaker Spotlight since October 14th, 2008. C, that the committee invite Speaker's Spotlight representatives to testify about all files related to speeches organized since October 14th, 2008 for Justin Trudeau and Sophie Grégoire Trudeau. D, that an order be issued to Speaker Spotlight to obtain a copy of all records related to speeches organized since October 14th, 2008 for Justin Trudeau and Sophie Grégoire Trudeau, including for each speech the amounts paid, any expenses reimbursed, and the name of the company, organization, person, or entity that organized it. E, that the documents listed in D be delivered to the clerk of the committee within 7 days of the adoption of this motion, and that their consideration be in camera. F, that for the consideration of documents studied during closed meetings, only committee members be allowed to participate. No mobile or electronic device be allowed in the room during these meetings. Numbered hard copies of documents be given to committee members by the clerk at the beginning of each meeting scheduled for that purpose, and that these copies be given to the clerk at the end of each meeting. And lastly, copies of documents be kept in the clerk's office, and that outside of meetings, committee members can only view them by going to the clerk's office, and no mobile or electronic device be in the room during the consultation of documents. So that is my motion, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay. I think all of the members have had, I know that I got a copy of this motion myself on my PNAN account. I assume that everybody does, so I won't need to redistribute it. That, with the motion being moved, we'll move forward with debate on this motion. And I have, yes, Madam Shanahan is online, so I wanted to let you know that our speaking order is as follows. Mr. Angus, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Workington, Madam Shanahan, Mr. Fergus, and Mr. Sorbera. Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair. I was actually surprised at your opening statement about how it is possible to change a motion. We are sent here representing our parties. Each of us are appointed because our party sends us, and so we are representing our party. If a party votes one way on a motion and then gets political heat from that vote, they don't get to come back and then insist that we redo it. And I say that, Mr. Speaker, with all Chairman's great respect, because I've been 16 years in Parliament. I have never, ever seen a motion that is voted down by a party that they get to bring back 2 days at the next meeting and say, well, let's do another one. This is the same motion that the Bloc voted down. So it, regardless of its merits, to me, this is completely out of order with standing practice of the House.
Mr. Angus, on your first point, I want to commend the clerk for hours and hours of work that she did, and I reviewed over the past 3 days in regards to what are some options, because we had heard from members about some concerns, and we combed through literally. I think, if I remember, the earliest ruling was about 30 years old. I might be off by 10 years, but there has been precedence set, but I agree with you, Mr. Angus, that and that's why I said that I would not, although there has been a vote negativized in the past. I don't think it's a good practice of the committee. But as far as the motion on the floor today, again, after studying a number of precedents, there's enough variance in this motion that it is in order. It does call on a study rather than just a submission of documents, and there's several other points of it that are substantially different. And so it is in order, and now we're debating that motion. We'll move on to Mr. Barrett.
Well, thanks very much, Chair, and having had the opportunity this morning to review the motion from Madame Gaudreau, I'm pleased that we're considering a study of the safeguards that are in place, and with respect to preventing conflicts of interest in the government. And I think that in our examination, should this motion pass, we'd look very closely at the safeguards in and around specifically the Prime Minister's office, as we've seen with respect to the awarding of the Canada Student Service Grant contribution agreement. And I was very disappointed with the outcome of our vote a week ago. And like many others, I reviewed the footage after the fact on that question, and of course, was eager today to hear if there would be a request for the motion to be reconsidered and how the chair would rule. But see that while the issue was raised, that the committee was not asked to reconsider that specific motion, and while there are elements of the motion in front of us today that would affect some of the same ends that I sought with the motion that we spent 17 hours debating in this session of Parliament, there are many more elements of it that the committee will have to consider, and specifically, as you rightly point out, Chair, that we undertake a study. Now, members of the committee will recall that this summer, when we undertook a study similar to this, that the demand for witnesses placed on the committee was substantial from all parties, particularly from the government. And I think that there has since then been more information that's been made available through the document released to members of the Finance Committee. But we also, I'm just getting an echo, so I can imagine if it's that it's tough for other folks to listen to me when I don't like to hear myself either. So thank you very much. So we do have more information, and perhaps that would narrow the scope, shorten the length of time required to address some of these issues. And when we look, Mr. Chair, at the amount of time that we have in front of us, the 2nd of November, and the House adjourns the second week of December, I believe. And so we really have a limited amount of time. And then the House resumes the last week of January. So we don't have a tremendous amount of time with the 17 hours as water under the bridge at this point. But we do have information that we've received that we can build on. And so the ask in the motion, the intent, and the public interest with respect to this matter, I think is very high. And so with that said, and I will note also that the motion that I had presented at our first meeting with respect to documents, and government members and other opposition members having advocated for safeguards, if you will, or enhanced measures. To see that type of language included here, I hope that it would hasten the debate, so that while everyone has the opportunity to get their say, we don't venture into the multiple meeting, multiple week scenario as we did with the other motion. So that said, Chair, I'm pleased to say that I will be supporting the motion introduced by Madame Gaudreau, and look forward to having the opportunity to vote on the question.
Thank you very much. The speakers list hasn't changed, so we'll go to Mr. Workington. I do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully you can hear me here. I'm having a little bit of delay on my internet connection. I just would like to amplify that this motion is a compromise. It is a compromise that addresses the concerns that have been brought forward by the Liberals on after hours and hours of filibuster. I think that this includes all of the provisions to secure the documents, to ensure that they aren't distributed, to ensure that only members see them without electronic devices. I think it also addresses some of the concerns that have been brought forward in terms of the inclusion of other family members. And so this is a compromise. I believe that it is far and away, it made significant concessions to the Liberals. And so I'm hoping that in the effort to provide and ensure transparency and accountability for every Canadian, that we can expeditiously move on this and ensure that it passes today.
Thank you, Mr. Workington. Just to review, Madam Shanahan, you're coming up next, and then we have Mr. Fergus, Mr. Sorbera, and then Madam Gaudreau. Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And Chair, I would like to call the vote.
Well, okay. I want to take a look around the room. Is everybody prepared to vote on the motion?
Could I request a recorded vote, Chair?
Yes, it will be recorded by our very capable clerk. And it looks like there's consensus to go ahead.
On the motion of Madame Gaudreau, please say yay when your name is called if you're for the motion, and please say nay when your name is called if you oppose the motion. Mr. Dong,
No.
Mr. Fergus,
No.
Madame Latancio,
No.
Ms. Shanahan,
No.
Mr. Sorbara,
Je vote contre la motion.
I am
Yay.
Monsieur Gould,
Oui pour la motion.
Mr. Workin,
Yes for the motion.
Yes.
Madame Gaudreau,
Oui.
Yes.
Mr. Angus,
I abstain.
five nays, 4 yeas.
Five yeas, 4 nays.
Mhm.
It's the motion's defeated. Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On October 22nd, I brought forward a motion for study that pursuant to Standing Order 1083H, this committee undertake a study into issues of conflict of interest in the Lobbying Act in relation to pandemic spending. That this study continue our work relating to the Canada Student Service Grant, including this committee's work to review the safeguards to prevent conflicts of interest in federal government expenditures, government spending, We Charity, and the Canada Student Service Grant, and the administration of the Canada Student Service Grant and We Charity. And that this study include A, an examination into MCAP and Rob Silver's involvement with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. B, the consideration of all aspects of the government's involvement with Baylis Medical Company, Inc., as well as former Liberal Member of Parliament Frank Baylis, including the awarding of procurement contracts for medical devices. C, an examination into Palantir Canada's relationship with the government, including the Breach of Conflict of Interest Act by its president and former Canadian ambassador to the United States, David McNaughton. D, an examination of the use of partisan resources and processes in the appointment of federal judges that may have constituted violations of the privacy rights of nominees, and that the committee report its findings to the House with recommendations to better permit the government to conduct the business of government with public confidence in its integrity. I hope I get the support of my colleagues in this motion. We have been over a month debating how we're going to get to work, and we haven't actually gotten to work. I think that we need to clear up a number of outstanding issues. Particularly, we had begun the We Charity study, and we never finished it, and we have an obligation. I'm a stickler for if we put resources into a study, we finish that study and report it to Parliament. We had talked with the government about a committee to address pandemic spending issues, and that had not come forward. So I believe if my colleagues are willing to work with me, we can get this motion passed and get down to business and get a report to Parliament as soon as we can get this report finished. So I'm hoping to get support for this motion.
Mr. Angus, is this a motion you've tabled before? It's on notice, I mean? Okay. We're just going to suspend for a few minutes so that can be distributed to members of the committee. fantastic. And then it will be Mr. Fergus, Mr. Sorbera, Madam Goodrow, Mr. Barrett, and Madam Latanzio. Did you just put up your hand? Is that correct?
I did.
Okay. All right, then Mr. Fergus.
Well, Mr. Chair, before we begin, I think you should mark down for the minutes that Ms. Shanahan had yielded to me. This is historic, and we should.
It's
Can we get a plaque?
it's even better. It's on video, so
Can we get a plaque
you can play
for
it
that?
over and over again. Yeah.
I will to my heart's content. She's one tough customer. Anyhow, aside from that, Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Angus actually laid out some really important points of the committee, of the work that we've been asked to do. And I know that over, a good bit of time, we have been, we've disagreed, and we haven't been able to move forward on the committee's agenda as much as possible. And I think we have an opportunity here that we can move forward on particular issues. I think we have an opportunity here with Mr. Angus's motion to take a look at some key aspects which I know are of concern to this committee and of the Canadians. And there are some elements which I think have also been covered off. I think of, and if I could just, if you'll forgive me as I pull this, I'm working off of one screen. So, Mr. Chair, I got to change screens to see the motion. As to, the introduction of the motion, I think Mr. Angus raises a fair point. Going to Part A. I think this issue has largely been dealt with by our ethics commissioner, who had ruled not very long ago, that a couple of weeks ago, that indeed Mr. Silver and the ethical screen that was set up by the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister was actually indeed correct, and he didn't see that there was an issue there for it to be investigated. Again, our role is, in terms of ethics committee, is to help support the ethics commissioner, and if the ethics commissioner is telling us that there isn't an issue there, I would suggest that's one element that we certainly, I would like to see removed, or at least, at the very least, that's not the issues that we should be studying at this time. Regarding elements B and C, I think they are fair game. The ethics commissioner has not investigated that, and if we wanted to turn our attention to those elements, I would, I certainly wouldn't stand in the way of that happening. And as for the final element regarding the appointment of federal judges, I would suggest respectfully, Mr. Chair, that would be an element that should be pushed to the Justice Committee, as it falls more squarely within their bailiwick than it would fall into ours. So to that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose an amendment to Mr. Angus's motion that we remove Article A and D from this motion, and that would allow us to quickly move on and get to work on the other elements that are included in Mr. Angus's motion. And I think there would be, we can show Canadians and show ourselves that we can come to a reasonable agreement and move on and get to work. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make that amendment to Mr. Angus's motion.
All right. The amendment's been made. Do you have that already typed out, Mr. Fergus, that you could send over to the clerk?
Was that necessary, Mr. Chair? I'm just looking to remove two articles, A and D.
A very competent clerk said that that's fine. We can deal with that just since it's just a removal of A and D. No worries.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
I'm going to review the speakers list right now. Madam Shanahan, did you put your hand up once more?
Yes, actually, to put myself after, I think it's Madame Latanzio.
Yeah. So here's because we have people in the room, we're kind of doing this by high tech, low tech. So here's our list right now: Mr. Sorbera, Madame Gaudreau, Mr. Barrett, Madame Latanzio, Ms. Shanahan, and then Mr. Angus. Now we are debating the amendment.
Chair, is there any willingness to vote on the amendment?
Is there any? Do I see some consensus to vote on the amendment? Yes, there is consensus. Oh.
De l'avoir par.
I would like to have it written, a written amendment, because we received the motion.
Just a moment, colleagues.
L'amendement.
Inaudible.
A, D.
We're removing A and D. That's the amendment.
Proceed. Okay. We're voting on the amendment to remove A and D, and I'll leave it to the clerk for a recorded vote.
Thank you. On Mr. Fergus's amendment, please say yay if you are for the motion, nay if you're against when your name is called. Mr. Dong?
I vote in favor of the amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Fergus?
Je suis en faveur de l'amendement.
I'm in favor of the amendment.
I vote in favor of the amendment.
Ms. Shanahan?
I vote in favor of the amendment.
Mr. Sorbera?
I vote in favor of the amendment.
Mr. Barrett?
Nay.
Mr. Gould?
Je suis contre.
I'm against the amendment.
No.
Madame Gaudreau?
Je suis contre.
I'm against.
Mr. Angus?
I vote in favor.
6 yeas, 4 nays.
6 yeas, 4 nays, so the amendment passes. We'll now move on to debate on the amended motion. Mr. Sorbera, do you want to remain on the speakers list for the debate on the amended motion? Okay, then you're up, sir.
Yes, I do, Chair. And thank you. Great to see everyone this morning. And thank you to my colleague, MP Fergus, who I've known for many years for the great work on putting forward the amendment to Mr. Angus's motion. I'm not going to speak too long. I know there are others on the list, and we're working within the confines of time. I do wish to say that in looking over the amendment, and that to me it doesn't. I don't have any too grave concerns with the amended motion. We've removed some elements of the motion. Obviously, the ethics commissioner did rule on the recusal on point A, or there was some feedback there that nothing wrong was done. It was great to see the ethics commissioner also over the weekend and early, was it Friday, also make comments, provide commentary to the former finance minister, and that's proceeding. With regards to D, I had significant concerns with D, so I'm very happy to see that removal. I do have slight concerns on C, on Mr. Angus's motion. The former Canadian ambassador to the United States, David McNaughton, has done a phenomenal job representing Canadians abroad and representing our interests in the United States for many years, particularly during a time when NAFTA was being renegotiated into USMCA, and his record speaks for itself. I'm going to stop there. I know there are others that do want to speak, and we're at 11:35, so I'll yield the floor to to my colleagues on this one here. But great work by my colleague, Mr. Fergus. And thank you, MP Angus, for putting forward your original motion.
Merci, prochaine députée.
Thank you, Madame Gaudreau. So, I'm going to summarize what happened in the last 17, 18 hours. We had more than enough time to discuss what our position would be regarding Mr. Barrett's motion. After a lot of deliberation, we were victims of a communications problem. And what troubles me, because I was in the House for good reasons, it was my file, communication was an issue, and we stated right away that there was an error. You can go listen to the interpretation, because even Mr. Workington 20 minutes ago was experiencing a communication delay. So, we need to be concerned with this digital problem. We have never witnessed such a situation. Now, what am I getting at? Because it's difficult to change things, we did our research. You know that I was for a motion was tabled. A motion was tabled that was not very different. Perhaps some changed their mind after the weekend, or because it wasn't coming from them. I'll repeat. What is our role at the Ethics Committee? Is it results? Is it increasing the confidence of those who voted for us? If the answer is yes, well then, I would appreciate proof that we can reach collective goals. And it wasn't my goal to table a motion. It was to go back to what was already there. You knew how I was going to vote. Now, taking all of that into account, the motion that's in front of us, amended to remove A and D, is receivable, and I would like to table an amendment so that we reach our goals considering the time that we have left. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to amend this notice of a motion and include B, C, D, E, and F that I will be able to read aloud so that we can discuss it. I believe that we could reach a consensus and vote on it. Would you like for me to read it? Please do. It's very simple. If you look at the motion that I tabled this morning, please look at point B. That in carrying out the study, the committee study mainly but not limited to contracts with regards to the speeches of Justin Trudeau to the end of point B. So what I'm proposing is to add an extra letter to Mr. Angus's notice of motion. Do I need to read it, or do you have it in front of you?
L'amendement que je
The amendment that I'm proposing to add to this tabled motion. So, we would be adding what would technically be C to this amendment. So, we're adding that in carrying out the study, the committee study mainly but not limited to contracts with regards to speeches of Justin Trudeau and Sophie Grégoire Trudeau within the framework of activities organized by Speaker Spotlight since October 14, 2008.
We just voted on this motion. If it's voted down twice, we can't bring it back a third time.
Well, letter complete, Mr. Angus. So this is an amendment to a motion we're debating right now, and I will certainly confer with the clerk in that regard. But let her complete. Yeah, let's hear the entire thing, and then we'll suspend for a moment.
Excellent.
Perfect. Now that the committee invites Speaker Spotlight representatives to testify about all files related to speeches organized since October 14, 2008 for Justin Trudeau and Sophie Grégoire Trudeau. That an order be issued to Speaker Spotlight to obtain a copy of all records related to speeches organized since October 14, 2008 for Justin Trudeau and Sophie Grégoire Trudeau, including for each speech the amounts paid, any expenses reimbursed, and the name of the company, organization, person, or entity that organized it. That the documents be delivered to the clerk of the committee within 7 days of the adoption of this motion, and that the consideration be done during closed meetings. And only committee members be allowed to participate to the consideration of these documents. No mobile or electronic device be allowed in the room during these meetings. Numbered hard copies of documents be given to committee members by the clerk at the beginning of each meeting scheduled for that purpose, and that these copies be given to the clerk at the end of each meeting. And finally, that copies of documents be kept in the clerk's office, and that outside of meetings, committee members can only view them by going to the clerk's office, and no mobile or electronic device be in the room during the consultation of documents. We could change the words a little bit, Mr. Chair. We're modifying the motion at the beginning of our committee, and the goal, after 18 hours of discussions that we had, I think that we'd be able to reach this goal. We'd have a solution where we'd all be able to respect our obligations in order to continue what we'd been working on for the past months. And because time is moving quickly, we could go around the table and vote, because we've already heard your opinions for hours. We've already made a lot of progress. So I propose this amendment.
We're just going to suspend for 2 or 3 minutes so I can confer with our clerk here. By the fact that this was even a unique circumstance for our clerk as well as for me. There is precedents that we looked at in regards to the previous aspects that we were dealing with, and there's a measure of what's called means and variance. And because this, although we've heard this in an independent motion, because it's embedded within an entirely different motion, this is an amendment to a motion that's standing on the floor right now. The means is different than the previous motion, so I will rule this amendment in order. I think it's always better for the chair whenever there's a question in regards to ruling that I would take the broader latitude rather than the narrower latitude, and so I would always argue for the more freedom for members rather than less, and I will rule this in order, and we will now be debating the amendment of Madame Goodrose to our existing amended motion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, point of order?
Yes, point of order. I'd like to challenge your decision.
You're certainly allowed to do that. And we'll go to the clerk for a recorded vote in that regard.
Just to clarify, Chair.
Clarify, Mr. Dong, yes?
Yes. For the recorded vote, can you repeat the question?
Oh, Madame Latanzio has challenged my ruling in regards to the amendment of Madame Goodrose being in order. So she has the right to do that as a member of the committee, and so you'll be voting now to either sustain my decision or not. The question is, do you sustain the decision of the chair?
Thank you.
Is that clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, on the question, shall the chair's ruling be sustained? Please vote yay if you are in favor and nay if you are against. Mr. Dong.
No.
Mr. Fergus.
With the greatest respect, no.
Madame Latanzio.
No.
Madame Shanahan.
Against.
Mr. Sorbera.
Unfortunately, against.
Mr. Barrett.
Yay.
Monsieur Gould.
Oui.
Mr. Workington.
Yes.
Madame Gaudreau.
Oui. Yes.
Angus.
Concerns with the decision of the chair, but I will vote always to support the chair.
The results are 5 yeas and 5 nays.
Okay, in the event of a tie, the chair does not need to vote the decision. Pardon me? That's okay. Yes, on a thank you. That's good that I clarify that. Yes, yes, because it's not just any tie. Whenever there's a tie in regards to a decision, the sustaining of the decision of the chair does not need to vote, and the decision is sustained. So we'll move now to debate on Madame Goodrose's amendment, and unless someone wants to be removed from the speakers list, I'll continue on with the one that I have. And we'll go to, and oh, by the way, I should let you know what I do have. That's Mr. Barrett, Madame Latanzio, Madame Shanahan, Mr. Angus, and Mr. Dong.
Mr. Chair,
yes,
before
Mr.
we move, is it possible if you could sound out the members, if we could just proceed to a vote?
Sure. I'll just check and see if there's consensus to move to a vote.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Would it be possible to receive Madame Gaudreau's amended motion? Can we all receive it? I know she read it out, but I'd like to, just for myself, to have it.
Yeah, we can make sure that you have that sent to you. We'll suspend for several minutes to make that happen.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Chair. I appreciate the amendment and the discussion that followed. I'll note. I want to make a few notes. I know we're going to encounter bells before 12:30. Chair, what happens in this committee is not a vacuum, nor is the work of other committees. And we've seen play out at other committees I will say hasty decisions by chairs, and though I have strong opinions on, of course, how I would like each vote to go, I get one. But the chair makes his rulings, and while I haven't been in the room for the other meetings, I know, based on your comments, that you consult extensively with the clerk. In the room for this ruling, on, you know, for myself, I don't have stake in the decision as chair. I'm not. I wasn't voted as chair by colleagues on this committee. That responsibility was given to you. And on what I would say would have been a pretty easy, you know, decision. I think it could have been adjudicated on quite quickly. The meeting was suspended, and you consulted with the clerk on the question before rendering your decision. And I'd like to contrast that for my colleagues on the committee against what we've seen at other meetings, when we know chairs have, during this session of this parliament, during heated discussions, adjourned meetings without a vote while members withheld consent to do so. We've seen a number of procedural irregularities at best, if not violations of the rules of this place. And hear an awful lot about, you know, with respect and with reservation on the vote.
Point of order, Chair. Yeah, point of order. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, MP Barrett, for those comments.
I'm not done.
There's a point of relevance here. That what you're speaking about has nothing to do with what's on the floor currently being looked at in terms of the amendment that's been put forward by Madame Gaudreau.
Thank you for the point of order, Mr. Sorbera. I think all of my colleagues here from every party know that I give folks quite a bit of latitude in regards to the topic at hand. I've trusted for all of you that you, even though you broaden your scope, you generally come to the point. And so appreciate the point of order, and I will just encourage Mr. Barrett to move the topic at hand as quickly as he can.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So we heard comments from the members, including that member, you know, with respect and hesitation and reservation. But that's respect and reservation and thoughtfulness is what we've seen from the chair. And to look to overturn his ruling, I think those who voted in that regard, it speaks to their motives and their intentions when we've seen the contrast, the fairness at play in this room, which doesn't always break the way I'd like it, of course, but that's how an impartial chair works. We have not seen that at other committees dealing with this issue. And so while the chair's actions speak for themselves, so do the actions of those who voted to overturn that ruling. Chair, the amendment to the motion, and we heard from Mr. Angus, and I do look down the table to see a colleague who has logged nearly 2 decades in Parliament, and he talks about the resources that have been expended and have been devoted at this committee to some of the issues that we're dealing with, and so as to not squander the resources and the efforts that have gone into bringing us to where we are today. And we know that the amendment has been ruled in order. We know that the consideration in Ms. Gaudreau's amendment reflect the will of the committee. Again, though I personally disagree with some of the points in the amendment, I know them to be the will of the committee in its current composition. And so, while not striking the exact effect that I would look to achieve, it does affect the outcome that the majority of members on this committee have publicly stated they're seeking. With respect to the main motion and the committee reviewing the safeguards to prevent a conflict of interest in the federal government, including the CSSG and the relationship with its awarding to the WE organization, it's certainly germane. And to have an individual be able to speak to those documents from the organization, to have these documents in hand with the safeguards preferred by members of this committee, I think would go a long way to being judicious in the future use of this committee's resources and time. Because in a subcommittee or in the full committee, in terms of deciding how to govern ourselves during the development and the progress of that study, we'll have resolved a question that is surely to be asked. And it'll be done with the main motion. The main motion, which has now been shortened, it's been narrowed in scope, and will affect what I have expressed, previously, as far as getting some work done, substantially looking at issues that are in the public interest and looking at them in the limited time that we have. We have, few days before the House will rise for Christmas, and it's unfortunate to be talking about Christmas now. The year is slipping away. We haven't even had Remembrance Day yet, and people are putting up their Christmas trees. And so, with that in mind, we need to get to the business that we've been sent here to do. And these issues were of great public interest and developing public interest over the course of the summer, through prorogation and into the new fall session. And so I appreciate the amendment. The main motion as amended is supportable, and so I hope that the committee can undertake to do that. And Chair, and I will conclude, but I would like to say that if possible, with the resources of the House and in consultation with the parties, if the committee, which generally meets twice a week, and this committee was identified as a priority committee by the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs at the start of this session, if we can have a second meeting scheduled this week, I think that would be prudent in furthering the business of the committee, knowing that the opportunity even for an extension today with votes after question period, votes before question period, really boxes us in, and then losing next week to a break week. Hopefully we get that work done this week and don't need to come back during a constituency week. So with those thoughts, I'll yield the floor. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Barrett. Appreciate it. Also, we'll do what I can. I'll confer with the clerk after the meeting to see what House resources we might possibly be able to shoehorn out of what we have left here right now. I'm going to just review the speakers list. It is Madam Latanzio, Madam Shanahan, Mr. Dong, Mr. Angus, and I see Mr. Workington has removed his hand. So, and I apologize, I inverted. It was actually Madam Latanzio, Madam Shanahan, Mr. Angus, and Mr. Dong. So, Madam Latanzio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will now yield the floor to the next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Shanahan.
I too will yield the floor.
Okay, well, right now the bells are ringing. I'll need unanimous consent.
Chair?
Yes.
Chair, if there's consent to vote on the amendment and then to let everyone go for bells, could you poll the committee to see if we could do that?
I will assume that if the committee wants to vote on the amendment, then you're also giving me unanimous consent to continue on for a few minutes into the bells, because it's my obligation to actually adjourn unless there's unanimous consent, or suspend, I should say. So, colleagues, would you like to move to vote on the amendment? Okay, I see consensus. Then I'll call on the clerk to record that vote.
Thank you. On the amendment of Madame Gaudreau, please say yay if you're in favor, nay if you're against. Mr. Dong?
No.
Monsieur Drouin?
No.
No.
Ms. Latencio?
No.
Ms. Shanahan?
Against.
Mr. Sorbera?
Against.
Mr. Barrett?
Yay.
Monsieur Gould?
Mr. Gould. Yay.
Mr. Workington?
Yes.
Madame Gaudreau?
Madame Gaudreau. Yay.
Yes.
Yes.
Five for, 5 against.
Colleagues, there's lots of precedence in regards to how the chair should vote in the case of a tie. And in this case, I think it's rather easy for me because the mover of the motion just voted in favor of the amendment. So in that regard, I'm going to vote along with the yeas, and the amendment will pass.
Should we vote to the main motion now?
We'll go to the main motion now. And I'll rely on the clerk again for another recorded vote.
Point of order, Chair. I thought I thought the unanimous consent was given on voting on the amendment, but not on the main motion. I still have a couple of things to say about the main motion.
Okay, well then, first off, the bells are ringing. We would need unanimous consent to continue on debate of the main motion. Is there unanimous consent to do that?
Yes.
No, it's withdrawn. All right, colleagues, we're going to suspend for votes. Johnson coming back. Excuse. Okay, that's better. All right. Colleagues, right now I have from the previous list, I had Mr. Angus, Mr. Dong, Mr. Workington. I see Madam Shanahan's hand up as well. And unless there's some issue with that, I'm going to continue on. Mr. Fergus, did you want your... Okay, got it. Okay, Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we have been now weeks into this. I will say that I think it is ridiculous that I had to hear the bloc claiming that they didn't hear a vote that we had debated for 17 hours, but that's water under the bridge. I think we need to move to the vote and carry on so we can get work. We are here to work for the people of Canada. We have to get to work. So I would say let's just put it to a vote.
Colleagues, is there a consensus to move to a vote? No. I've got a signal that there's no consensus. Okay, Mr. Dong.
Well, thank you, Chair. With respect, I just want to share my thoughts with committee members why I thought this is pretty bizarre, and I support my government colleagues' challenge. You know, we've been at this for a long time, and every member on the committee has participated in the debate, spoke out on their thoughts on Mr. Barrett's motion last week, and we came to a vote, and the majority of the committee has spoken, and that was my understanding. That was the end of that motion. For the bloc member to come back and move a motion that's substantively similar to Mr. Barrett's motion, you made a decision on confirming the voting record last week, and see now that the member has taken basically the parts, the core, the central points of Mr. Barrett's motion, which we voted on, and her motion, which was deemed out of order, back as an amendment to Mr. Angus' motion. I think it sets, just, you know, as you said, it sets a bad precedent for moving forward, because we members on this committee, we are acting on behalf of our constituents and to make sure that there's accountability in government's action, and our decision stands, especially after we all agree to move to a vote, and we stand by those decisions. If we just using tactics or come up with creative ways to try to get our way, it sets a bad precedent going forward. And every member on this committee, from this point on, with what I've seen so far with the accepting this amendment and to debate this amendment, can basically move motions to revive the previous debates. And to me, that is not productive. I rather us moving into something that looks at facial recognition. I rather us talking about something that address the immediate concern of Canadians given COVID. You know, I think this kind of gaming, you know, with technicalities back and forth, we're not doing a good service to our constituents. So I that's why I disagreed with accepting the honorable members' amendment. Their party was well represented last week. They debated, they voted on amendments, and they voted on the main motion, and that was the outcome. To revive Mr. Barrett's motion, take the core part of that motion, and try to reintroduce and in the form of amendment into Mr. Angus' motion. I think it's just that sets a bad precedent, and I would want all members of this committee to consider that and to make sure that our committee going forward can be productive and, quite honestly, can practice in good faith from all party members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dong. Just a review, we have Mr. Workington, Madam Shanahan, Mr. Fergus, Mr. Sorbera, Madam Latanzio, and Madam Goudreau. On to Mr. Workington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems as though the bills are now moving into another lengthy filibuster and attempts to ensure that Canadians in this committee don't find out what's included in these documents. At one point earlier, they said that that they would support it if, in fact, the family members were taken out. The family members are not included in the amendment, and it seems as though the Liberals have decided that these documents are so dangerous to them, that they have such a bombshell included in them, that they would rather filibuster this committee rather than allow for transparency and accountability. And so, Mr. Chair, I do believe that we do need to move to a vote. I will cede the floor with the hopes that we can move expeditiously to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Workington, but immediately there was no consensus. I'll move on to Madam Shanahan.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think it's important that every member of this committee have their voice, and I commend the Chair indeed on your patience and ensuring that is the case. That being said, I will yield my time again to Mr. Fergus, so I hope he takes due note of that.
Mr. Fergus, I usually don't comment on anything, but you've got two good videos now, so at least that's a good takeaway from this committee.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
It'll lose something now in a delay. It's okay. It's you have.
I'm yielding the floor to you, Greg.
I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Chair. Once in a session would have been enough, but twice, completely unexpected. Mr. Chair, I'd like to, and I was just trying to look. Let me first start off by saying I seem to have missed some of the fireworks, as I had to leave the committee to go give a speech at a digital conference. To my surprise, I see that once again the elements of a motion that had been defeated twice seems to have made its way back onto an amendment that I had moved to try to receive the support for the majority of the colleagues to go down that road. I'm a little disappointed that we have now find ourselves. Yes, sir.
Sorry, your internet,
yes, sir.
Your internet is cutting in and out. So maybe if you just want to go back a couple of sentences to make sure that we capture that. Your audio dropped entirely out for a couple of sentences.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is my connection okay now?
It appears to be good now, Mr. Fergus.
Are you hearing me now?
Yeah, we are. We are hearing you now, Mr. Fergus.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate your patience, and I beg the patience of all my colleagues around this table. I'll get straight to the point. I would like to make an amendment to the motion as it currently stands, Mr. Chair, and I do so with the intention of trying to move us into action, to not go down the same avenues which we have gone down before, which has led effectively to a stalemate, and try to move us into making sure that we can at least move on the issues in which I believe we all agree. So to that end, Mr. Chair, I would like to move that we delete the amendments which were proposed by my honorable colleague from the Bloc Québécois, and to replace them with the following 5 points. So, Mr. Speaker, let me just pull up my document that I was working on before Ms. Shanahan had yielded the floor to me. So I'd like to add new clauses and to renumber them accordingly, but I will use the numbering that I'm going to have in front of me. A, that the committee study the use or possible use of facial recognition technology by various levels of government in Canada, law enforcement agencies, private corporations, and individuals. B, that the committee investigate how this technology will impact the privacy, security, and safety of children, seniors, and vulnerable populations. C, that the committee examine the impact of facial recognition technology on racialized communities. And D, that the study include how this technology may be used nefariously, such as a tool for criminal harassment or for other unlawful surveillance purposes. E, that the committee investigate any possible link, formal or informal, between Canadian law enforcement agencies and private technology corporations and startups, including, but not limited to, Clearview AI and Palantir. And G, that the committee examine the impacts of facial recognition technology and the growing power of artificial intelligence. Those, Mr. Chair, would be my amendments to replace the amendments that were proposed by Madame Gaudreault. Thank you, sir. I will send this also to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus.
Can we suspend while we see that motion?
Look, yeah, you want to know what? Send it over. We're going to suspend for 3 minutes, but I do want to say to you, Mr. Fergus, I did not recognize any aspect of it that's germane to the motion that's on the floor. But we will send it over, and we will take a look at it, and I will make a firm ruling on it in 3 minutes.
Well, Mr. Chair, the reason why I think it is germane is because one of the 2 elements of Mr. Angus's motion deals with facial recognition technology, and I just want to take this further in that investigation, sir.
Yeah, that's why I said send it over, and we're going to take a look at it. Yeah,
will do.
that are turned off their video, etc., that maybe want to reconnect. Well, colleagues, the motion that we have on the floor right now has to do with pandemic spending, and that's the overall framework. There's really nothing here that would relate to the amendment that's at hand. So I'm going to rule that amendment that's out of order right now, and we will return back to debate on the motion. So we'll go to Mr. Sorbara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do find it disappointing that the committee is not able to return and really focus its diligence and judiciousness of all members here to studies that are impacting and to the matters impacting all Canadians. Mr. Chair, where there was a story over the weekend, and I will go back to the amendment at hand, or what we're discussing with regards to an entity collecting 5 million images of Canadians. And I'm a big believer in privacy. I'm a big believer in transparency. And I feel it is the duty of this committee in the day that we live in to begin to study these issues that all Canadians face. They're very serious issues. They're very pertinent issues in terms of the day we live in terms of the technology that's being used. And Canadians have a right to know that their privacy is being protected. And I plead to the committee members to stop this fishing expedition, to stop wasting the time of the committee resources, and to clearly get back on track in terms of what the mandate of the committee is in terms of looking at privacy. Mr. Chair, if I can get clarification from you, can someone now read, or it may have been emailed, and I just need to check my inbox. Can we get the amendment, what we're dealing with now? We did adjourn for the vote. Now we are back. I just want to make sure I'm on the right page in terms of what we are referencing a debate now. Is it we are referencing the debate on Madame Gaudreau's amendment, or are we referencing debate on the amended motion? Please, sir, if you can clarify that, and then I would like to continue after that clarification.
We're on the amendment still, correct? Yeah, we're on the main motion as amended, Mr. Sorbara.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I have grave concerns on the amended motion, if I'm using the proper language. Again, I believe this was at, we've just kind of gone back full circle. If I can use a golfing analogy, I think we had a mulligan today. That is the only way I can reference it. And I think that's not a good thing for this committee to have done in accepting Madame Gaudreau's amendments to Mr. Angus's motion. We had a mulligan today, and let's call a fact a fact. That's what happened, occurred today, and I wish to express that disappointment. We had a do-over. I have great concerns on the privacy implications of the amendment, the amended motion. I have to go back and look at this and read it over again to see where I stand. I am not in favor of it currently, and will continue most likely to be so. I am going to yield the floor to one of my colleagues so I can just kind of look at this and come back with some more wisdom on why and where the committee should proceed in my humble view in terms of what we should be doing. It's really disappointing, Chair. I'm going to stop there and I will yield to the next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to recap the speakers list. We have Madame Latanzio, Madame Gaudreau, Mr. Barrett, and Mr. Angus. I think I've captured everybody, unless Madame Shanahan put a new hand up. And okay, and then Mr. Fergus, I see your hand up as well. Okay. All right, Madame Latanzio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come back on my request for the amendments, the decision that was rendered with regards to the amendments brought forth from Madame Gaudreau to be reinstated into the main motion. I think that to be patronized as a member of this committee to sort of say that, where this is all going and it wasn't, almost the way to go in terms of challenging the chair, Mr. Speaker. I have respect for you. I accept, the process, but I think that it is within my right to be able to challenge if I feel that a decision is not rendered, based on what is being presented. So I think it is incumbent on all members, not just myself, to challenge if a decision is rendered that goes against what that member, he or she, believes to be the right decision to be made. And I will tell you that this is not the first committee where this occurs. I can tell you that I pulled out what had transpired in the Finance Committee not too long ago, where someone also challenged the chair. And it was a colleague, MP Poilievre, who was who wanted to or declare out of order a motion to bring forward the documentation from the previous session, and it had not moved or passed. And there was opposition over the ruling of the chair, even though the chair had taken the advice from the clerk. So the chair ruled on that motion pertaining to privilege raised by Mr. Poilievre, and on October 8, 2020, out of order, as it relates to proceedings before the committee in a previous parliamentary session. The chair ruled that the debate on the motion moved by Julie Dersowich on October 8, 2020, regarding the pre-budget consultation now resume, whereupon MP Pierre Poilievre appealed the decision of the chair. The question was, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Was out, and the decision was overturned on the following recorded division. Yeas, 5, nays, 6. So to have a member come in today and say that, even if a chair consults and it is, in his or her opinion that the decision be made and not warranting an amendment or declaring it receivable or not, is fine. But it is also fine on a member to be able to challenge it. And I just wanted to make that clear. Now, with regards to the amendments brought forward by my colleague, Madame Gaudreau, these are the same amendments, or these were the same 3 topics that a former colleague of hers from the same political stripe decided last week that they not be part of the motion. So, that was voted down. And although Madame Gaudreau tells us that, her vote was written in the sky, I can tell you quite frankly that I come to committee, I do my work, I listen to everybody, and I don't pretend to know or guess, or look at the sky to see how people are going to vote. I think that when one person votes, and when I hear that vote, whether it be a yay or a no, that's what I take as a vote. I don't think that we should have, we should guess, or we should, come to some hypothesis as to how one is going to vote or not vote. So that being said, the decision on that was clearly made. And now to bring it again into a motion that I think that committee members around this table showed goodwill and want to move forward with regards to the 2 paragraphs that were proposed by our colleague, Mr. Angus, to me showed moving in the right direction. And unfortunately, we are back at square one. So, there's comments that are made, criticisms that are made, judgments that are being passed. And, at the end of the day, I think that genuinely all of us have an interest to be able to move on and delve into the two paragraphs that were brought forward by our colleague, Mr. Angus, this morning. And I think that we had a consensus around the table. And to bring back again something that we have already decided on, I will tell you that we've already made a decision on that. And so we found a way to be able to amend an motion and to reintroduce those very same topics. To me, is just it just does not make sense. So I too am going to yield the floor to the next speaker, and I hope that we can, bring closure to this and move on. Thank you.
Madame Gaudreau.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's just past 2, so I'm going to take a few minutes. What does it mean if we come back to step 1? Well, we'd be able to make sure that we are ensuring some due diligence. My colleague was replacing me, and she misunderstood. There was a mistake. There was a communication problem. There was an interpretation problem for more than a minute. So she was not hearing, she was not able to hear what was going on. If this is the first time that this is happening, we don't want to cause a problem, so we may not say anything. And I know that you've all been through something like this. So yes, we are going around in circles because I didn't miss any time with you. I was there from the beginning to the end. I was replaced for a couple minutes only once. You've had somebody replace you. You've all had somebody replace you, so you know what this means. I understand the process. I am not positing any hypotheses. I was clear every time I took the floor regarding who we are. We are an ethics committee that needs to focus on conflicts of interest, on lobbying. And when we're stretching time, when we're trying to hide something, what happens? We start over. And we need to reflect on what we need to hide when everything seems fine. And if it's not, we need to come back and read or look at what happened. We spent hours and hours on an amendment. We were able to reach an agreement, and then I reread what was discussed over the weekend, and I didn't know where you were at. I was gone for a couple minutes, and when I came back, I said, there's been a mistake. Can we negativize the vote? And we already would have been able to move on. I am so disappointed. From the beginning of my being here, I have never talked about filibustering. I always ask questions. Why are your speeches so long? But I think the facts are here. People who are listening to us see things clearly. They are concerned. They're concerned about their future. They're concerned about what's coming. The end of the year is coming. There are so many problems. Facial recognition is such an important issue, and we'd already be working on this. It's a minute to midnight. You refused to negativize the motion, and we found ourselves in a context that was almost the same. I think that things should go well, And I'm asking you to act as good legislators without partisanship. People want to know where we're at, and so I'm ready to vote.
No consensus. Mr. Barrett.
Chair, we're just about a question period, and so just well, it doesn't. There's obviously not a will of the room to continue with the meeting. The discussion has to continue. This vote needs to be resolved. The committee needs to do its work. Canadians need answers, but there won't be bells for our attendance in question period, but there will be bells for. Actually, no bells for the votes that immediately follow. So just look to you, Chair, how we can resolve our attendance here and then resume consideration of this question.
Well, you could move a motion to adjourn, Mr. Barrett. And,
so move, Chair.
Okay, so there's a motion to adjourn. Is there consensus to adjourn, or do I need to go to a vote? Consensus to adjourn? Colleagues, will be adjourned till 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. Well, that woke everybody up, didn't it?
It sure would.